All right, this is our next lesson that we have in this Colonial America unit. The next thing we're going to talk about is slavery in the colonies. When did it come, and kind of what it looked like throughout this time period. So there are several misconceptions when it comes to slavery. First off, most people think that slavery was not around until the Underground Railroad or the Civil War, or slavery wasn't a big deal until the Civil War, because that's what people were fighting about. So that's kind of what everybody was looking at, that slavery was just a deal. The truth is, slavery's been around since biblical times. For example, the Jewish people were enslaved by the Egyptians and later freed by Moses, as it talks about in the book of Exodus. Slavery was brought to Jamestown because of the amount of tobacco being grown could only be harvested with the slaves' help. For them to be able to turn a profit, they had to have labor, and it was easier for them to bring in people to work for free than it was to bring in people to actually be paid for it. Some indentured servants or volunteer slaves, people that sold themselves into slavery, could earn their freedom by paying off their debt. Basically, an indentured servant, again, is somebody who shows up, who sells themselves into a kind of slavery and just sits there and works until they pay off their debt. So think about having like a credit card bill and not being able to pay for it. You can go work for the bank, and when you work long enough to pay it off, then you can be free from there. Um, Next, we had what life kind of looked like for these two groups of people. Now they were enslaved African Americans, people. They were African American. They were from Africa, where they were as a slave, and then there were another group that was free. Now, politically, the slaves had no political voice, no rights, no nothing. They were seen as property and told to do what they needed to do. Economically, they were the labor of the plantation system. Plantation system is the large systems of farms. They were considered property. The children were even considered property and sold with no regard to your parents. So basically, they could show up and take you away from your parents, sell you to somebody else who lives across the state, and you would have no way to stop it. Socially, they were viewed outside of the American identity, loose communities within the plantation system with ideas of family religion and active resistance. So these groups would work together and inside the plantation system, sometimes to actively resist, like the slave owners being particularly abusive. They would try to find ways like break their materials and tools, things they could do to try to slow things down. But family religion were key components when it came to slavery with their personal lives. They Religion was a very big deal, and so was their family time. Now, the freed African Americans, these are again no political voice and very limited, restricted rights. They were seen as like fifth class citizens. They weren't even seen as second class citizens because of their skin color. Economic Economically, they could earn wages, but they're going to earn very low wages, so they're not going to have a whole lot of extra money. Socially, these are the lowest social classes. They have limited access to education, socially isolated, and again have the same things with family, religion, and resistance being key components of their social life. The impact of slavery. Enslaved people were viewed as property and labor supply. Property became a big deal later on, but slaves were seen as nothing more than property. Uh, Aided in the development of the plantation system and an agrarian or farming southern economy. So in the South, farming became the main way they made money, especially with tobacco and later with cotton. Without that and without the slave labor, that industry would never have taken off in the South. So these are a little bit of notes on slavery inside of our colonies.